We're going to try something a little different this week. Chicago Bears, it's officially the offseason. Senior Bowl happening this week. Free agency happening in the next month. Super Bowl coming up. Maybe a couple players on either of those teams could be on the Chicago Bears next year. So we thought it'd be a great time, and this was an idea of our producer, John Meadows, who's going to join me for this week's episode. We're going to do a little bit of a Chicago Bears mailbag, and hopefully this is something that we can continue throughout the offseason, and if you want to add to it, please feel free to. Whether you're watching us on YouTube or whether you're listening on WLS, you can follow us at Sports Talk Chicago, subscribe to our YouTube channel, drop a question, and we'll continue to do this mailbag as the offseason rolls along. So without further ado, let's bring in my producer, John Meadows. What's up, John?
Hey, Joey. How are you? Hello, everyone. So this week, I wanted to talk lots and lots of Bears. So a little bit about me, and I may have mentioned this before in long ago episodes. But when it comes to Bears, I've been a fan of the Bears since '85. I'm a casual fan as best. I don't have the depth of the intricate knowledge that you have, or the past John had. But one of the reasons really pushed this show forward was so I could talk sports with people. So I had a professional reason to really watch Bears games because truth be told, I have a pretty eclectic background, and I don't really have any sports friends. I have music friends and I have geek friends and things like that. But my huge sports friends are you and John at the moment, or formerly John. So that's the background. And so I'm going to start this off with I sent you a video. Don't know if you watched it. It's I'm a fan of a few YouTube creators, and I sent you one by a guy named Brendan Perna. He's a Broncos fan, but he does a lot of video essays about all things NFL. And the gist of that video, in which I agree, is right now I am taking the role of the off-season king. Okay, I am on that hope train. I am shoveling that coal. I'm dragging people on this train. We're going to rule in 2025. But through my smile, I am grinding my molars. Because in the back of my head, and I agree with Perna, if this doesn't work, we're doomed. We're doomed with a capital D. We're going to need to pack up and move to Albuquerque. I mean, I don't know what else we can do at this point. And so I want to roll that out to you. If this doesn't work, are we doomed?
John, thank you for your question. As we lead off with, are we doomed? Now, look, I'm going to answer this in a couple different ways. And the first one to keep in mind is that Chicago Bears fans, we have been through a version of this before. And it rolls back to, I'm going to start with, first off, with the quarterback, right? Mm-hmm. When we talk about drafting a quarterback, especially in the NFL, and when we talk about drafting a quarterback high in the draft, you have to be really careful to not only hit on the player, but also create the infrastructure that will be able to support that player to reach his top potential. Now, I will say this, if you roll the clocks back to when we drafted Mitch Trubisky in 2017. We had a great season in 2018, the type of season that I think Chicago Bears fans hope that they get from a first-year, offensive-minded guru coach coming in with a young quarterback heading into his second season as a pro. And that coach at the time, Matt Nagy, went out and won 12 games. And if it wasn't for a double doink, we'll never know whether they go to the Super Bowl or not, right? Mm-hmm. We are in a very, very similar situation with a new offensive guru coming into town with a quarterback taken very high in the draft, entering his second season in the NFL. So naturally, we want to believe that there are the same type of hopes and beliefs that we have. Now, the doomed factor comes into play like this, where unfortunately, in my personal opinion, and I was able to get some version of inside sourcing on this, that around 2019 in training camp, regardless of how you feel personally about Mitch Trubisky, around in 2019, I was told that Matt Nagy started to turn on Mitch Trubisky. The front office went to Matt Nagy and asked him, hey, can you coach this kid? Do you believe in him? Do you think he can become a Pro Bowl player? In the offseason, Matt Nagy said yes. By the time training camp rolled around in 2019, something had changed with his viewpoint and his relationship with Mitch Trubisky. And at that point, he was kind of on the outs with him. And then that began a spiral that honestly has led us through multiple head coaches, multiple offensive coordinators, a new general manager, 2 new quarterbacks after Mitch Trubisky, signing a guy like Nick Foles, signing a guy like Andy Dalton. So what I'm saying is, it's not that we're doomed, but when you talk about doom and gloom, if they don't get Caleb right, if Ben Johnson isn't the right hire for the Chicago Bears, this can put the franchise back 5 to 8 years minimum. Now, I don't know about you guys, but a lot can happen in that 5 to 8 year span of time where, yeah, maybe your fandom will be shaken. Maybe your interest in the team will go down. And yeah, it continues this perpetual motion of, are the Chicago Bears ever going to get it right at the quarterback position? And the Chicago Bears ever going to become a stable winner? Something that has never happened with George McCaskey since he took over 12 years ago. They have not won a playoff game since he took over 12 years ago. So, people ask me all the time, if I had a question to ask George McCaskey, what would it be? My first one would be to ask him honestly, does he believe that the Chicago Bears are a winning organization? Because I would love to hear that answer. Because in my opinion, if you look at the evidence, you look at the wins and losses, let's keep it really simple. Let's keep it to math. They have not been winners. So after that, Mitch Trubisky, whether you like him as a player or not, they got that wrong. And now 7 years later, we have a new quarterback with a new offensive guru, and we're trying it again. So I'm not going to use the word doomed, John, but it's a great phrase, right? Where if they get Caleb and Ben Johnson wrong, you could easily say to yourself, roll this forward 7 years and let's see if we can try it again. And that's why I think it's so pivotal for Ryan Poles to not only just nail the head coaching hire, which we hope he got right, but obviously the draft, free agency, the players that he brings in, because this is a huge pivotal year and offseason for the Chicago Bears moving forward. So I'm not going to go as far as saying doomed because I want to stay optimistic. And you are the offseason king, John. I want to kneel in front of royalty. But again, you have to be very careful because if they screw this up and if they don't give Caleb Williams every opportunity to be good, and Caleb Williams needs to in turn also do everything possible for him to become the type of player that we all believe that he wants to be, you could wake up in 7 years from now, they could be trying this all over again.
I'm glad you brought up the Matt Nagy thing because that was definitely a road I wanted to go down. I want to come back to the McCaskey thing. I want to put a pin in that because I have a McCaskey theory that I want to run by you. But this next question, so I've always thought of coaches as like an afterthought. Like my thinking has always been like very player heavy. And this is a theory that I've had for a while, right or wrong, and it comes from a conversation, many years ago that I had, was that, like, say the 85 Bears. I think you could have put a sack of potatoes as the coach for the 85 Bears, and they still would have run roughshod over that league. Like, just lightning in a bottle happened. And using Matt Nagy as an example, and then using examples of, say, like a Sean Payton Sean. Who's the Rams guy? Is that Sean McVay?
Sean McVay, yeah.
Sean McVay and the Jared Goff. In your view, how important is the coach's impact? And can coaches, and let's use Mitch as an example, how important is the coach's impact and finding people who develop players as opposed to shoving a playbook into them and being like, you're in the NFL now. You need to play like this. What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, so real quick, when we talk about coaching and its importance, I'm just going to kind of hit some of the other sports just really quick and then bring it back to football, because I do think football is probably the most important when it comes to in regards to coaching. Now, I'm going to be very glib and on the surface about these other sports. So forgive me if I don't go into too much detail, but in my personal opinion, when it comes to baseball and coaching, yes, a pitching coach can help teach you a different arm angle or try and help develop a different kind of pitch. He can give you information and analytics to show you where location-wise where pitches succeed, and you can go out and execute a game plan. In hockey, a little bit similar to as well, where they push a lot of style. They push a lot of style and a lot of different speed, but mostly it's all about trying to find combos to find you great teammates and running mates within your lines to go out there and have some success. And then basketball, a little similar to as well. You could draw plays, but again, it's a little bit more about style. It's a little bit more about pace, and it's more about putting the player in a particular position to accentuate his strengths and have them come out within the course of the game. So I'm not saying that coaching doesn't matter in those three sports. I just think that they're a little bit different than in football. Now, when it comes to football, I think it hits almost every single tier that you could out of a particular sports athlete. So when you're talking about playbook, when you're talking about confidence, when you're talking about style, and when you talk about development, I think a football coach plays a large role in a lot of these guys' careers and whether they're able to rise and ascend and become the players that they need to be. Now, to be very fair, to put it on the player, right, they have to come into camp in shape. They have to come into camp with a particular mindset, and they have to come in with a particular work ethic where they put in the time to allow themselves to be in a position to succeed. A lot of times in football, they talk about the game being too fast for young players in the NFL. I think a lot of that is when you get a certain amount of coaching or development, you watch enough tape, you can at least begin to read and diagnose situations that would then, in theory, slow the game down so that you can play fast, if that makes any sense. You can read the situation and have it slow down for you so you can play as fast as you can and not think about it. Now, when you come back to Matt Nagy and Mitch Trubisky, and it's funny that we're still doing this a little bit, but honestly, I like that you're bringing this up, John, because there are similarities right now that we're walking into with Matt Nagy, Ben Johnson, Mitch Trubisky, Caleb Williams. A couple of differences. The first one, obvious, is Ben Johnson has been an offensive play caller for multiple years, and everyone on record knows for a fact that he was the one pushing the buttons and calling the plays. Ben Johnson was also a guy where I've made a comment that I always had a skepticism about Ben Johnson, which I still do a little bit, about how he had all these great players on Detroit and how easy it was for him to execute some of his game plan. But, keep in mind that he came in his first year. He had wide receivers like Khalif Raymond. He had a running back like Craig Reynolds. And he immediately took that offense and turned it into a top 10 offense. And then the preceding years, as better talent came in, turned it into a top 3, top 2, top 1. When it comes to Matt Nagy, the problem that we always had with him was his finger always on the switch? Was he the one pushing the buttons, or was it Andy Reid calling the plays? Even to this day, as the Kansas City Chiefs prepare to go for their third Super Bowl in a row, I don't think anyone on the planet is saying, wow, Matt Nagy, offensive wizard. Everybody on the planet knows that it is Andy Reid calling the plays and calling those interesting wrinkled formations in those critical moments in those games. So the thing that really bothered me was that I remember in 2018, we go 12-4. Mitch throws for 24 touchdowns. He has multiple games of throwing over 300 yards. They utilized every single one of their weapons that Ryan Pace brought in perfectly, whether it was Taylor Gabriel, Trey Burton, Allen Robinson, so on and so forth. Tariq Cohen has a breakout season, a guy that he drafted. In 2019, Matt Nagy, I'll never forget, comes to training camp, and it begins boasting that he is now going to have Mitch Trubisky begin what he calls offense 2.0. And I remember at the time thinking that was a huge red flag for me. And the reason for that was that I thought at that point in his career, Mitch Trubisky just needed to continue to get better at the things that he was already good at, right? You could be good at something, but you need to become elite at something. And in my opinion, I thought Matt Nagy was pushing a little bit too much of the offense onto the young kid. And as we saw, Mitch Trubisky had problems his second season, had more bad games than he had good games. And yeah, the head coaching staff, Matt Nagy, they began to lose faith in him. And then all of a sudden, people are asking who's calling the plays. And the next thing you know, Bill Lazor's the offensive coordinator. Then the next thing you know, Matt Nagy's taking over play calling again. And the NFL is a really, really tough game. So you have to be really careful when it comes to the confidence and development of a particular player. Now, I think coaching is pretty huge in football for a couple reasons. The first one is it's a dangerous sport. So if a coach is asking you to go out there and do something in particular, you really got to trust that coach knows what he's doing to put your own body in harm's way in the cause of winning. The other part about it is that when we look at football, and something that I railed against with Matt Eberflus pretty regularly was adjustments are key in the NFL. There's some weeks when you'll show up and you're going to want to do what you think your bread and butter is, and that other team is already read your mail. And you're going to have to adjust on the fly and try and figure out a way to counter what the other team is doing. Something that I think Chicago Bears coaches have really struggled with in the past. I think offensively the last couple of years, especially with Justin Fields, Luke Getsy, they would run a great first 15 plays, and then after that they were lost and had no idea what to do with their offense. On the flip side with Shane Waldron, didn't run a first 15, went out there, his offense was DOA from the jump, and they had trouble adjusting and getting back into the game until it was too late and Caleb starts making all these plays and starts racking up all these yards. Mm-hmm. My final point on coaching and why I think it's important, especially with Ben Johnson moving forward, is one, when you talk about a young player like Caleb Williams, I brought it up on last week's show, there are some rumors and rumblings about how hard Caleb works, how hard Caleb needs to work. And I think it is very fair with a young player at the NFL level where a coach, it is incumbent upon that coach to teach the player what they don't know. And I know that sounds obvious, but you can walk in being like, I know the game of football. I excelled at the college football level. But you can't expect every single college football player that's drafted in the NFL to know what NFL work ethic looks like, what NFL game tape breakdown looks like, and what it means to take your game up to the next level to become a Pro Bowl player, become an All-Pro, to become a legend, to become a Hall of Famer. In my opinion, if we want to start giving Caleb Williams a hard time, I want to point a little bit at that coaching staff and say, hey, wait a second here. If Caleb Williams doesn't know it takes this or X or Y to get to the point that you need to get to be an NFL pro, to be an NFL star, can you really blame ignorance on a young 22-year-old kid? This is going to sound like I'm defending Caleb Williams, but I think this extends towards a lot of other NFL players out there. And my final part about coaching is look what they just did with bringing in Antoine Randall L., the wide receivers coach. I've been having a healthy skepticism about Ben Johnson. Let's see how it goes. I absolutely love the fact that they hired Antoine Randall L. as our wide receivers coach and associate head coach for the Chicago Bears. And here is why. When we talk about Ben Johnson, everyone wants to talk about his fun little trick plays, the little shovel passes, the misdirection, the formations that no one's really seen before, the running in the same formation but running multiple plays out of the same formation, and in turn running different formations but running the same plays in different formations. All that stuff is great from Ben Johnson. But the players, I was so impressed with the Detroit Lions players at how detailed they were and how they were able to perfectly execute, honestly, something that looked pretty complicated on the field and something that a lot of NFL teams don't try and do. I got to give a lot of credit to that coaching staff for drilling it into those players at how important it is to know the details, to be able to go out there and use your athleticism and then execute the play. Credit to the players for executing it, but I think it goes hand in hand with coaching. So in the NFL, in my opinion, they're great players, right? Don't get me wrong. But I'm talking about the good players that want to be great players. I think coaching in the NFL is perhaps one of the more important aspects. I think it's one of the more important stations of coaching than there is across sports, in my opinion. Hockey, basketball, baseball, it all plays a role, but I think it plays a huge role in the NFL if you want to become an average player to a good player to a great player.